stories rise whispering, the echoes from the loam.
Welcome, wanderers, those drifting once more into the loam, where the night folds itself around us like a dark cloak, and the old stories rise from the heather with slow, deliberate breath. Before we step into the deeper places, I ask you, as always, to light your lanterns. Let that small golden glow settle at your side as a companion against whatever moves in the shadows. And if these journeys through folklore and fear speak to you, if they linger in your bones or follow you into your dreams, then subscribe. Share this with another wanderer, and leave your likes and your reviews so the path stays lit for all those who walk it. The night in the Highlands has a way of setting differently from other nights, as though it remembers things the daylight tries to forget, as though every ridge and hollow holds a breath that never quite escapes. And on evenings when the wind slides low across the moor with that thin whistling edge, you can almost feel the old stories stirring beneath your feet. There are places where the heather grows tall enough to brush your knees, and the pines stand in tight listening clusters, their trunks dark and straight as watchmen. And if you walk there after sunset, you might notice how the air changes, how it thickens with the faint sweetness of moss and the sharper scent of cold earth, and how the silence feels less like absence and more like anticipation. Men used to wander those paths with the careless confidence of those who believe the night is only a backdrop, only a stage for their laughter and their whiskey-warm bravado. And they would tell each other stories about strange lights seen between the trees, or the sound of hooves where no deer should be. But they never truly believed those tales belonged to anything real, anything with teeth, or hunger, or purpose. Yet the old folk knew better, and they warned their sons not to dance with strangers after dark, not to follow a woman whose beauty seemed too perfect, not to trust the soft gleam of pale skin in the moonlight, or the way a voice could curl around a man's ribs like a ribbon. They spoke of her in low tones, the deer-footed night woman, the Baobhan Sith, the one who came when the night thinned and the moon hung heavy, and the world just felt a little too close to its own bones. They said she did not walk so much as glide, that her steps made no sound until she wished them to, that her smile could loosen a man's caution like a knot slipping free, and that her dance, her terrible, beautiful dance, could pull the strength from his limbs and the breath from his lungs, till he collapsed at her feet like a puppet whose strings had been cut. And on one particular night, long ago, but not so long that the land has forgotten, 4 men found themselves wandering into the kind of darkness that listens, the kind that waits, the kind that has already chosen them. And their story begins in a sagging bothy, with the fire burning low and the whiskey running out. But the night outside was wide and cold, and something in the wind had already begun to turn its head towards them. The fire in the bothy had guttered down to a dull red smear of embers, the kind that barely warmed the air, and only reminded the men how cold the night outside would be. And the whiskey bottle lay on its side with nothing left to coax from it. And so they rose with that loose, restless energy men get when the drink has thinned but the bravado has not, pulling on coats that smelled of smoke and damp wool and stepping out into the dark with the careless certainty that nothing in the world wished them any harm. The door creaked behind them like an old warning, though none of them heard it as anything more than wood shifting in the cold. And the youngest led the way down the narrow path that wound between the pines, his boots striking the frozen earth with a rhythm that felt too loud, too bold for a night that watched them with such patience. The moon hung low and swollen and pale, casting a thin silver wash over the heather, and the wind moved through the trees with a sound that was almost a voice, almost a reminder that they were not alone. They spoke only once, a brief murmur about the cold, but the words fell flat, swallowed by the dark as though the night itself disapproved of conversation. And after that they walked in silence, their breath rising in faint white ribbons, their shadows stretching long, strange shapes across the frostbitten ground. And the path widened as they reached the clearing the youngest had promised, a place where the trees drew back and the sky opened above them like a great dark mouth. And the air felt different there, heavier, touched by something that made the oldest man pause without really knowing why. The clearing was empty. No deer grazing at its edges, no movement at all except the slow drift of mist curling around the stones. And yet the men felt watched, felt weighed, felt as though the night had shifted its attention fully onto them. And the youngest stepped forward, eager to prove the place was worth the walk. And the others followed, though each felt the faint prickle of unease along the spine, the kind that comes when instinct tries to speak but pride refuses to listen. The wind died off, the silence deepened, and from between two pines, where the shadows pooled thick and black, something began to move with a grace that did not belong to anything human. Her hair hung long and black, drifting as though stirred by a wind that none of them felt, and her dress was pale enough to catch the moonlight in thin, trembling ripples. But it was her stillness that unsettled them first. The way she held herself with the quiet certainty of a creature that has never once feared the outcome of a night. The youngest felt his breath hitch, not in desire but in the sharp, instinctive recognition of something wrong. Something beautiful in the way venom can be beautiful if you don't know what it tastes like. She tilted her head, and the motion was too fluid, like the glide of a deer turning its attention to sound. And the men felt the clearing tighten around them, felt the air thicken as though the night itself had leaned in closer to listen. Her eyes were dark, not the soft darkness of a woman glimpsed in low light, but the deep, hollow dark. The dark of something that has never needed light at all. And when she stepped forward, the frost beneath her feet didn't crunch, didn't shift. didn't acknowledge her weight at all. And the oldest man saw it first. The faint, sharp glint of something hard striking stone. A tiny spark leaping from the ground, and his stomach dropped as he realized her feet were not feet at all. They were the delicate hooves of a deer, polished and narrow and utterly silent, except for that single, deliberate click that she allowed them to hear. She smiled then, a slow unfurling of lips that revealed nothing of her teeth but everything of her intent. And the clearing seemed to pulse with a thin metallic scent, the kind that rises from blood before it spills, the kind that makes the back of the throat tighten. The youngest took half a step back, but she mirrored him with such perfect precision. It felt less like mimicry and more like possession, as though she had already slipped inside the rhythm of his breath. Her hand lifted, pale and slender, and the air around it shimmered with a faint ripple, a distortion like heat rising from a forge. And the men felt their bodies respond before their minds could protest, felt their limbs loosen, their chests open, felt the strange, irresistible pull of her invitation. She moved with a slow, deliberate grace that made the men feel the night had begun to tilt toward her, as though every shadow leaned in to watch. The youngest stepped toward her, but not willingly or consciously, but with the helpless momentum of someone caught in a tide. And she drew him into a slow turn, her pale dress brushing the frost without disturbing it, her hair drifting like smoke, her eyes fixed on his with a hunger so quiet it was almost reverent. And the others followed, pulled by the same invisible thread, their boots scraping the earth in uneven rhythms, their breath coming faster as the cold around them deepened into something sharper. And the clearing changed as they moved, the mist rising in thin coils that wrapped around their ankles, the trees seeming to lean closer, branches creaking. And the moonlight thinned until it was little more than a pale smear across their skin. And the men realized, too late, that the light did not touch her the way it touched them, that it slid off her as though repelled, as though she belonged to a different kind of night entirely. Her hooves clicked once, a deliberate sound that cut through the air like warning, and the youngest stumbled, breath catching in a frightened grasp. But she steadied him with a touch so gentle it made his fear twist into confusion, into something softer, something dangerously close to trust. The oldest felt his heart hammering against his ribs, felt the cold sinking into his bones with a weight that made his legs tremble, felt the first thin thread of dread coil around his spine. And she spun them faster, her movements impossibly smooth, her dress flaring in pale arcs that seemed to slice through the darkness. And the men felt their strength draining with every turn, their breath thinning, a strange pressure building behind their eyes as though the night were pushing inward. And the clearing pulsed with a metallic scent, and the youngest knees buckled again, his face paling, his lips parting in a soundless plea. And she smiled. Not kindly, but not cruelly. She smiled with the soft, inevitable satisfaction of a creature who has never once lost her prey. The mist thickened, and the clearing felt smaller and smaller, closing in around them, sealing them in with her, and the men realized, with a slow dawning horror that comes when instinct finally breaks through bravado, that they weren't dancing with a woman at all, but with something ancient, something that had chosen them long before they stepped into the clearing, something that would not let them leave. The youngest's legs finally gave out beneath him, not in a sudden collapse, but in a slow, dreadful weakening that feels like the body forgetting how to hold itself upright. And she caught him with a tenderness that made the oldest man's stomach twist. There was nothing human in the way she held him, nothing comforting or protective, only the inevitable certainty of a creature guiding its prey into stillness. The dance did not stop when he faltered, she simply adjusted, her movements shifting with that eerie predatory grace, her hair drifting like smoke, her eyes fixed on him with a hunger so calm it felt almost ceremonial. The others tried to pull away, tried to slow their steps, but something around them thickened. It resisted the movement, clung to their limbs, made every breath feel shallow and insufficient. The oldest man felt dread coil around his ribs, his heartbeat stutter, felt the terrible realization settle into him that the night was not merely watching, but participating, closing in and sealing them into a space where escape had already been erased. She lowered the youngest to the ground with a gentleness that made the moment more horrifying, not less, because it felt ritualistic. It felt practiced. It felt like the final movement of a dance she had performed countless times before. Her hand brushed his throat, her fingers pale against his skin, and the oldest man saw the way his breath fluttered, thin and frantic. Saw the way his eyes widened in the last flicker of understanding. Saw the way his chest rose once, twice, and then shuddered. Her nails traced a slow line across his skin, a motion so delicate it could have been mistaken for affection. And the clearing tightened around them, holding its breath. And the oldest man felt his own breath catch, felt the cold bite deeper, felt the dread settle into his bones. And the youngest one exhaled one last trembling breath. And she leaned in, her hair falling forward like a curtain of night, her pale hands steady, her posture serene. And though the oldest man could not see the exact moment life left the boy's body, he felt it. Felt that shift in the air. Felt the night accepting its offering. He rose slowly, her dress stained, her eyes bright with that terrible, quiet satisfaction. And when she turned her attention to the remaining men, the oldest felt his knees weaken, his throat tighten, and felt that dreadful certainty that the dance was not over, that she had only just begun. The clearing felt smaller now, as though the world itself had folded inward, and the men realised that they were not witnesses to the boy's death at all. They were next. The oldest man's breath came sharp and uneven, and the moment she lifted her head from the boy's still body, something inside him broke. Not loudly or dramatically, but the quiet internal snap that happens when a man finally understands he's going to die. He stumbled backwards, boots slipping on the frost, and the others followed, their movements jerky and desperate. She didn't chase them, she didn't need to. Her hooves clicked once against the stone, a sharp, ringing sound that cut through the clearing like a blade. And the mist surged in response, curling around the men's legs, rising with a deliberate intelligence. And the trees leaned closer, and the clearing shrinked further. The second man tried to run, forcing his way through the mist with a frantic, stumbling lurch, but the ground beneath him shifted, the frost cracking in a thin spiderweb pattern that made him freeze mid-step. And in that moment she was beside him, not with speed or pursuit, but with that impossible silent glide that made the oldest man's skin crawl. Her hand brushed his shoulder, a touch so light it could have been mistaken for comfort, and the man's knees buckled, though his bones turned to water. She guided the second man downward with that same eerie tenderness, her pale fingers steady, her posture serene. And the oldest saw the way the man's eyes widened with that last flicker of understanding, the way the mist curled around his body like a shroud. And she leaned in. The remaining two men looked away, breath ragged, limbs trembling, minds scrambling for any path, any escape, any miracle. She rose slowly and turned towards them. They were participants in what they had witnessed. And she wasn't finished. The clearing felt wrong now. Wrong in that deep, marrow-level way that makes a man's instincts claw at his ribs. Wrong in the way the mist rose high enough to blur the world into a pale, suffocating haze, and the two remaining men stood frozen in that shrinking space. She turned toward them with a slowness that made the oldest man's stomach twist, because nothing about her movement suggested effort or urgency. Nothing suggested she saw them as a challenge. Her hooves clicked once, and the trees responded, branches creaking inward, shadows lengthening, like the forest wished to witness the end. And the third man tried to speak, a thin, broken sound that barely rose above a whisper, but the night swallowed it. And she tilted her head in that deer-like motion, her eyes bright with a hunger that was not wild, not frenzied, not chaotic, but deliberate and patient and ritualistic. She stepped towards them, her presence bending the air around her in that strange heat shimmer distortion. And the third man stumbled backwards, ground shifted beneath him, and in that moment she was beside him. Her hand brushed the third man's chest, and his breath hitched, his knees buckling, and the mist curled around him, and the trees leaned in closer, and the oldest man felt the dread settle into his bones with the weight of something final, something that had already decided their fate. She lowered the third man with that same eerie tenderness, and again the oldest could not see the exact moment life left the man's body, but he felt it. Felt the night accept its third offering. She rose slowly and turned her attention to him, the last man standing, and he felt his legs weaken and his throat tighten. He knew he was not a survivor, not a witness, not a lucky exception. He was the final step. And the oldest man stood alone now. She turned toward him with a slow, deliberate grace that made the air tighten even further. Her hooves clicked once, that sharp, ringing sound. He tried to run, not with hope or strategy, but with frantic, instinctive desperation. But the mist surged in response, holding him still, and the ground shifted beneath him. And she didn't chase him, she simply appeared beside him, with that impossible silent glide that made the world feel wrong. His strength draining with that slow, dreadful inevitability. He collapsed onto the frost. She lowered herself beside him with that eerie tenderness. The mist curled around them and the trees leaned in. And he exhaled one last trembling breath. And the world stilled. And though you can't see the exact moment life left his body, you can feel it. The shift in the air. She rose slowly, eyes bright with satisfaction, as she stepped back into the trees, vanishing into the darkness, as though she had never been there at all, leaving only the faint imprint of hooves in the frost and the lingering echo of a dance that had never been meant for human feet. The night resumed its slow, patient breathing, and somewhere, far beyond the reach of lantern light, the Baobhan Sith waited for the next man who truly believed that beauty was harmless. Wanderers, you've walked the long road with me tonight through the old hunger and the cold beauty of the tale. And before you drift back towards sleep or towards the waking world, I ask you to keep those lanterns lit. Let their glow follow you out of the dark and into whatever waits beyond this story. And if this story, if this journey stirred something quiet and ancient in you, please share this with another wanderer. Your likes, your reviews, your shares allow these nights to continue to open so others can find their way here to the loam. Blessings upon you.